Before we move on to explore further how the layers panel works, which is one of the first few important things you need to understand with Photoshop, I just want to show you something simple. I have made these scribbles on my picture, which I don't want. Now, an easy way to not save things that you did to your picture is to just close it, and when prompted to save, not save. Another option, if you haven't made too many steps, you can go to the edit menu and you can undo. So undo pencil removed my last act on this picture. I'm going to go again, and now if I change my mind I can redo it, but if I also want to undo my previous step, I'm going to click step backward, and now I have also removed my black scribble there. So Photoshop keeps track of quite a few steps that you take, which means that if you change your mind, you can always go and click to step backward to get back to the state where you want it. Obviously, there is a limit to the number of steps, and it depends on how this is set on your computer and the memory that you are dedicating to this function. Now, going to this panel here, which is called the Layers panel, this is one of the most important things to understand starting to work with Photoshop. Right now, the document we've got has got only one layer. It's called the background layer, and it is locked. I'm going to take this panel out so that we can see it better and bring it here. Now, any panel that is floating, I can grab it from the bottom and I can change its size. So I don't want it to be so small, I want it to be a bit bigger, so I can add more layers here and still see everything. You can also change its width if you wanted to. From the bottom here, I've got some buttons that if I go over will tell me what they do. So as you see, this button here creates a new layer. So I click it, and what happens is a new layer appeared over the layer I was, the background layer. Now as you see, this layer is not locked. The background layer is locked by default. Now next to each layer is a little eye. If I click on the eye, the layer disappears temporarily. If I click again, it appears. Now, when my background layer is disabled because the eye has been clicked, I see this gray and white checkboard pattern. This is Photoshop's way to tell you that there is transparency here. So it's not white, because white is still a color. This is a transparent layer, which means that if I start drawing something, I don't fill the whole layer. Whatever is below will be visible. So if I enable the layer again, of course my scribble will be visible. Now the difference here is, before, when I scribbled on the paper, the only way to get rid of that scribble was to go and undo. Now that my scribble is not actually on the background layer, but it is on layer 1, if I don't want this on my picture, there I have more options and more flexibility. For example, I can just disable the layer and it will disappear. Another option is I can go here, select my standard rectangular marquee. What is the rectangular marquee? It's a way to draw a selection on my screen, and whatever is included in this marching ants rectangle that I've got, if I hit delete from my keyboard, it will be deleted. So two things here. Number one, if I want to make a selection, I select my rectangular marquee and I draw, and I can delete things in my selection. Sorry for my screen probably froze a bit. Let's get back. There we are. Sorry. Okay, so I deleted my scribble this time by selecting it with my rectangular marquee and hitting delete. So what this means is, if I've got two scribbles, one here and another there, and I only want to delete one of the two, I can get my rectangular marquee, draw around what I want to delete, hit delete from my keyboard, and still have my other selection remaining. Another thing I can do, because this scribble is now on a separate layer, I could, for example, just move it around. Okay, it's not connected to my background. There are two separate things. I can keep adding layers, so if I wanted to add another picture on top of this one, so let's say for example that from this picture I want to select a part, so let's say this part, I'm going to go to the edit menu, copy this, go back here and paste. So now you see on my second layer I've got this picture. It appears to be covering the bird, but because they are not on the same layer, they are independent, so I can do whatever I want with this layer. I can move it around, move it partially out of my frame, I can change my mind and make a different selection, so I could select half of it and delete, and now move it again. They are just separate. So this stack of layers here, which can go on and on with different layers, is like a virtual stack of transparent papers, one on top of the other, and I can keep adding and making each object that I've got independent from another object, which is very flexible because it means that whatever I place on a picture I can change independently without doing something to the other objects of my composition. If I want to duplicate a layer, which might be useful sometimes, so for example I might want to experiment with my bird picture to do something, but I'm not sure I will keep it in the end, I can drag my background layer to the new layer, and this will create a background copy. So now let me disable those to have them out of the way. I make sure that I am on my background copy and not on my background, and I can go here and try to do something. For example, I could apply a filter. So if I go to my filter menu, which is something you can play around with, and decide to stylize this and emboss it, which creates this kind of effect. Okay, so if I click OK, it might be what I'm looking for, might not, but if I change my mind, I just disable that layer and go back to my background. Finally, if I want to get rid of a layer, so I really am 100% sure I don't want to keep this, so I want to delete it, I click this button with a bin which says delete layer. You obviously get a confirmation. It's a good idea to have a confirmation, so if you can avoid clicking, don't show again. So you always get a confirmation about deleting layer. I say yes, I want to delete it, so now that layer is gone. One more thing, if you've got a layer that you want to name something more meaningful than layer 1, if I right click, sorry, not if I right click, I can double click on the name and I can name this layer something else, so this is my scribble. Okay, so naming layers with meaningful names, especially if you've got more than 2 or 3 layers, can be useful, because if you open something which has got 20 layers and they're all just named with numbers, it's quite challenging to find which object belongs to which layer.